4, 3. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Wrestling with the Future. I am Mad Dog DeCipio. Yes, you heard me right. I am the Mad Dog tonight. Mad Dog DeCipio with a stellar crew, and let's get right into it. Let me introduce you to a newbie for the show. He's a good friend now. After one phone call, he's a great friend. His name is Seth With. They call him Mr. Fish and Chips. You are a boxing and wrestling historian, Seth.
That's right. And a boxing coach.
And I've done a little research on you, and you and I have talked a little bit, and you got some pedigree. You have a little pedigree behind you. So, yeah, I feel confident you know what you're talking about. And speaking of confidence and pedigree, brother, let me tell you what. I got a guest here. He's not only a guest, he is actually, in the history of this show, the second guest we've ever had live on air. And I don't know if he knows that or not.
No, but he didn't know that.
Yeah, for sure. It's absolutely true. The first was Jack Victory, and the second was Davey Hannon, my friend, my neighbor from Atlantic City. Davey Hannon is a journeyman that wrestles for Vince McMahon Senior's Worldwide Wrestling Federation from, I guess, wanting to say 73, Davey, 74.
Actually, 72. I found that out myself. I just found that out myself recently. I thought it was 73, and I was reading a story about Tony Gurria, and it turns out that Tony's very first match in the New York territory was with me in 1972. So I learned something.
And you finished up your wrestling career what year? I'm saying 89 is what my best research tells me.
Yeah, the end of 89. You're absolutely right.
Okay, so it was my research is on the money. Good.
Yep.
Good stuff. Davey Hannon is a guy who brings talk about pedigree. Holy crap. You've been around a bit, my friend, and tonight we're going to talk about. I may cry tonight because I need a box of Kleenex. So I'm going to cry over memory lane here. Wrestling when it was good, when it was, as our friend Nikki Brezhnikov would say, when it was real.
Yep.
Great book, by the way. If you ever get a chance to read Nikita Brezhnikov's book, When It Was Real. Yeah, when storytelling and characters and psychology meant something. So, Davey, let's just get right into this. Let's talk about, if I give you the book and you have the pencil now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And you're in charge of wrestling. How do you, as the guy with the power of the pen, how do you maintain great storytelling, good characters, implement ring psychology with the mess that's on our hands today? What do you do to fix this crap?
Well, first of all, let's keep in mind what we're talking about here. We're talking about wrestling.
Yeah.
Sometime back, I was involved with the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, and Bruno and I were really close friends.
Sure.
And he would not come to receive his honor because at the time he thought that Vince McMahon was involved. Anyway, this is just a little bit long way into the answer to your question, but
take your time.
I talked to Bruno, and Bruno and I would talk at least once a week, and I said to him, geez, I'd really like you to consider coming out and getting your ring and being honored. It's something that you deserve, that's owed to you by the world of professional wrestling. And I convinced him that the McMahons were not involved in this thing. So anyway, he finally agreed to come, and I was lucky enough to be able to induct my friend into the Hall of Fame. This is the real Hall of Fame. This is not the WWE Hall of Fame.
Right.
This is the professional wrestling. Anyway, I usually don't prepare if I need to speak. So I kind of winged it, and this will bring me to the answer to what do you do if you got the pencil and the book right now. When I was introducing Bruno, I went back to when I was a fan, and I happened to be in Madison Square Garden the night that Bruno beat Buddy Rogers, the old Madison Square Garden.
Sure.
And I said, you know what the marquee said that night? It said, Wrestling tonight.
Yeah.
Wrestling tonight. Rogers versus Sammartino. I said, there was no Hell in a Cell, Rage in the Cage. There wasn't Summer Slam, Spring Slam, Winter Slam. It was wrestling. That's what was going on. And that's what was going on when I got in the business. It was wrestling. And I never actually formally was broken into the business.
Right.
I didn't there were no wrestling schools. I didn't go to a gym to learn this stuff. I learned on the job.
And Dave, we should point out, especially back when you began your career, it was a really close-knit fraternity. You didn't get in unless you knew somebody that was already in.
This was a closed shop, man. This was a closed shop.
Yeah.
You didn't just walk in, and I had a BS my way into the business out in Kansas City. You know, I told the lie to the promoter out there. Then I came back here and told the lie to the promoter here, and they thought I was in. Okay. And what I did was I learned in the ring that I was not in. You know, and the old timer showed me. So as far as changing things now, I mean, I see, and this is not a knock on either the independents or the guys that are working now. They're for the most part absolutely phenomenal athletes. They're
great
tremendous athletes
no
right now, and they're better athletes because they're more sophisticated in their training and everything than we ever were. They're fantastic athletes. The only thing I would say to them now is, listen, when you get into the ring, the first thing you need to do is not jump up on that top rope and holler at the fans. And you don't need to do 50 or 60 high spots that mean nothing. Yeah. I don't want to see your finish, 14 different times. What we're going to do is we're going to wrestle. We're going to wrestle.
Absolutely.
And that's going to tell the story to the people. Now, we gave the people a little opportunity every night to suspend their disbelief.
Sure.
You know, we used to hear that nonsense a whole lot. Come on, this crap is all fake. You know, there were a couple answers we had to that stuff. You know, one was, well, you know what? I don't know what you see on television, but I could guarantee you for sure that I'm not faking, and it'll only take me about 30 minutes or 30 seconds to convince you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know,
well, Davey, Seth wants to jump in here real quick.
Sure. Yeah, if you don't mind me addressing that, talk about pedigree. I was trained by Fabulous Moolah. You and I talked about that, and Sputnik Monroe. And the thing about them, if you want to talk about, the old days or old school, is they talk about wrestling one and the same as boxing. They never, it was all prize fighting. It was presented as prize fighting, and you had to know how to handle yourself. So it was never, even though I was smart to the business, it was never drilled into me on the entertainment aspect. It was drilled into me more on the fight side, and that's eventually how I ended up getting into boxing and things like that. And you said something, Davey, that made me think of that quote from, I believe it's Johnny Valentine, that said, I can't make you believe that wrestling's real, but I can sure as hell make you believe that I am.
Absolutely right. That's where it came from.
Look at wrestling today. It's easy. I could come out here and say, oh, today's terrible and yesterday was better. Like you're saying, the athletes, they're phenomenal. But how do we help them interject? We can't, once they broke kayfabe, we can't put the genie back in the bottle. Yeah. But how do we help them interject that reality, that moment for the audience to say, well, I know what this is, but you know what? That one moment, that one guy, that was something. That made me think otherwise.
Can I throw my 2 cents in here, Davey?
Well, What's that? I'm sorry.
That's where our friend Bruno comes in. Bruno was the one guy came to the ring, no music, never had music. He looked like a champion. He looked like a wrestler. He looked like he could rip your head off. Okay? Because he could.
He could, yeah.
Built like a Persian house.
He could. He's the guy who made you believe because, as you say, Davey, you said it many times, they believed because we believed. And Bruno was a guy who believed that what he was doing was a fight, and he made it look like a fight.
Well, yeah, no doubt. Listen, there was a promoter in St. Louis named Sam Muchnick.
Sure.
Who was a tremendous promoter. He was a nice man. And I only worked in St. Louis, I think 3 times. I think I worked in there 3 times. But Sam Muchnick would say to somebody, listen, you are a professional athlete trying to win an athletic contest.
Exactly.
I don't want you arguing with the fans all the time. I don't want you jumping out of the ring. I don't want you trying to get disqualified, unless, of course, that was what we were doing. But Sam Muchnick said, you are out there to win an athletic contest. That's what you're there for. And that's why, if you looked at St. Louis was a great place to work, and it gave the fans quality wrestling every time they were there. There was nobody in there that made a joke of it, because for the most part, all of us would say, don't try to make a joke out of what we do for a living. That's not to say guys didn't have a gimmick and did their thing, and that was part of the entertainment. But everybody had to wrestle, and right now, I'm not sure how many of the guys in the business now have any. I'm sure some have a wrestling background. Some have a wrestling background.
Oh man, you just opened up a Pandora's box. Holy shit! You just opened up a Pandora's box and a half, brother.
But and again, I don't watch any of it. I don't see it. I couldn't tell you, but my wife watches. I think it's Dancing with the Stars, and she said to me, "Do you know this guy?" I said, "Well, what guy? The Miz, is that his name?"
Yeah, right.
Well, so she told me about it. He was a radio DJ or something.
Yeah. He was.
He was on MTV too, wasn't
MTV
he?
crew,
whatever it was. He wound up in the wrestling business. Well, I'll tell you 2 things that I can tell you for sure. He wouldn't have got into the wrestling business so quick.
Absolutely right.
Secondly, when he did get into the wrestling business, he would have gotten a little baptism rather quickly. And that would have been with some old timers that resented someone thinking that they can just walk in and do this.
Oh yeah, sure.
So that would be part of the change. I'd have to say to a guy, "Hey, listen, I want you to wrestle." Roy Shires in San Francisco, who was a wrestler, and in those days, the 50s and 60s, he was a top guy.
Yeah.
He was a megastar. Roy Shires would walk into one of his promotions, and he'd say to a guy that he didn't know, "Listen carefully. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to wrestle." We had an expression for a heel was called chop meat. He said, "I want you." That means punch, kick, whack. Do fight stuff, and then I want you to do a high spot or 2. That's what I want. But he started with wrestling. And so that's what we never discussed the psychology, but we had it in our head because we knew we were going to tell the people a story. We were going to make them invest in what we were showing them.
That's a hell of a segue. That's a hell of a segue. You can't have the psychology without the storytelling. Wrestling has always been theater, and let's just be honest, it's theater. And in theater, what do? You tell a story, You got a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yep.
And that's how the story's told. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, it is theater, but I think one thing important to do is look at where does professional wrestling fit today. And a lot of what professional wrestling used to be in terms of visually, I think mixed martial arts has stepped in and kind of replaced that. It used to be, like I was saying, part of the fight culture. Right. Now it's more part of the video game culture. You've got the comic book culture. You got all these different other things.
And that's not wrestling. That's the problem.
And it's not fighting. It's not wrestling. You used to have guys coming in from football backgrounds, from bouncers, bouncers in clubs and stuff.
You've always had that in wrestling. Understand something. You've always had that in wrestling. Guys that, and let's just be honest, Davey will tell you it's the truth. Guys that couldn't make a living doing anything else that could beat people up pretty good, they were almost guaranteed a career in wrestling.
Oh,
they
sure.
had a look, they had a certain fear factor about them. The problem today, Seth, you look at these guys, I could beat up half the fucking roster that's on there now.
That's my point exactly, is if you come from another athletic background or kind of a tough world or whatever, you could make it in wrestling and be intimidating and be believable. Nowadays, it's people that grew up watching Saturday morning cartoons and they want to be that superhero. And
therein lies your believability factor. There isn't a believability factor.
Correct. That's exactly.
That's exactly. No doubt. But I was lucky to be involved in what people call the golden age.
Yeah.
And a lot earlier than I got there. I've seen some of the matches, and I'll tell you what, they were a little bit boring. People didn't want to see two wrestlers on the mat for 35 minutes in a short armbar. They just didn't want to see that.
Let me throw a name at you, Davey. I'm gonna throw a monkey wrench into this theory of yours.
Okay.
Let me throw a couple names at you. George Wagner, Gorgeous George.
Great wrestler.
Let me throw another name at you. Ricky Starr, a guy who was a legitimate ballerina, basically.
Ballerina, that's right.
Okay. But Ricky Starr could leap across the ring with like 2 leaps, and he was, from one side to another. Back when they had those big boxing rings.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what else about him. He could light you up whatever he wanted. He was a tough guy.
Yeah, they say that that Ricky Starr, he was cut. If you ever take a good look at Ricky Starr back in the day, he had like the classic 6-pack ab. He had a complete V-shaped body. That guy,
big long muscles,
Well, he had all muscle.
And then you had a guy, talk about storytelling and psychology, George Wagner, a.k.a. Gorgeous George.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That took some cojones, some balls, brother, to walk down an aisle, wearing, chiffon and feathers and whatever sequins and.
Yeah.
I mean, that took some cojones, but let me tell you something.
Prior to that, George could wrestle, though. Prior to that, George
George could light you up, Seth. Let me tell you something. He was a tough son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's when the business started to change. Listen, one of my kids, since I'm technologically bankrupt, set up whatever they set up on a television, and my son said, "Here you go, check this out," and he put some video on there from the 50s and 60s, and I watched a match between Wilbur Snyder, was a big guy in the Midwest, and a guy named Warren Bockwinkel, which was Nick Bockwinkel's dad.
God, Nick's daddy, yes.
Yes. Now, let me tell you something. I appreciated it. It was a 2 out of 3, 40, 45-minute match.
Wow.
I think I saw, and now Bockwinkel was a heel. Nick's dad was also a heel. Yeah. I think I saw 2 punches thrown, 2, or 2 forearms. That was it. These guys wrestled, and a finish for them was a backdrop, boom, cover.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So that's what that was about. That was the people knew who the heel was. They knew who the baby was. A guy like Gorgeous George or Ricky Starr were creative enough and ballsy enough to say, okay, let's give them a little more to look at now.
Exactly.
So Gorgeous George said, well, you know what? I'm not only going to give them some wrestling, I'm going to give them a reason to really hate me.
Exactly right.
He had the forethought to do that, and it worked. I was lucky enough to come along after those guys, and they actually made it easier. They made it easier, but when I started, you had to wrestle. My very first match. Listen, I was an okay amateur. You know, I wrestled in school. I played football in school. I was in pretty good shape. I was big, and my very first match was in Sedalia, Missouri, against a guy named Joe Scarpello. Now, if you look up a little history on Joe Scarpello, you'll see that he was an NCAA and AAU champ.
Yeah.
I think he wrestled in the service. And in fact, years later, you know, I was talking to Bruno in a car one night, and I said, Joe Scarpello, and Bruno said, oh my God, what a nice man, and he knew what to do. And the referee was a guy that I got to know, Ronnie Etchison, one of those real grizzly old timers.
Oh, God, yeah.
Here we are in the ring. Don't forget, never broke it in.
Yeah.
Nobody showed me a thing. And I heard some terminology in the dressing room. I heard working, shooting. I knew what a shoot was because I was a shooter. I could wrestle. When we got in the ring and Ronnie Etchison brought us to the center of the ring, I said, are we shooting or are we working? And this is what I could still hear. Ronnie Etchison, he had a voice that sounded like he had an ice skate stuck in his throat. He went. So I said, "Are we shooting? Are we working?" And I heard Ronnie Etchison say, "Jesus Christ!" He says, "Oh no!" And Joe Scarpello, 215, 220 pounds, 5 feet 8 inches. Davey Hannon, almost 6 feet, 260. Joe Scarpello said, "Just take your best hold, kid." Well, in about 7 minutes, I realized I didn't have a best hold. Okay.
Stretch the shit out of you, Davey.
I'm saying to myself, what in the world is going on here? I'm getting, and he let me know that if he wanted to, he could really do some damage.
Absolutely.
Which he didn't. He was a great guy. So what happened there was a wrestling lesson for a new guy that thought he could just walk into this little world of theirs and know what he's doing. Okay, so psychology? Yeah, well, Joe Scarpello gave me a psychology course that night.
Oh my God, yes, he did too.
And the course was
because you triggered the memory bank for me, Davey, and I'm thankful that you did. There was a guy you may have known him. I know that you know his son, but there was a guy back in the day that was both a psychologist, a technician, a brawler, and at the same time could tell the story without doing much of anything. And he's a guy who could get heat without doing much of anything too.
Let me guess. Was Johnny Valentine.
There you go.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
He's a guy that could.
He started a riot with his face.
Exactly. That's my point. He could take a hold on you and hold it for 10 minutes, and people would get restless and boom. And what would he do? He'd keep it longer.
That's right.
He'd keep it longer because he knew that you hated him, and he wanted you to hate him a little bit more.
And he also wanted to tell him.
But yes, Seth, but therein lies the story. Therein lies the psychology. Therein lies how to get yourself over. And that's a question. Remember, Davey, on the old show, I used to say to people, and I've gotten I've asked the same question every show and never got the same answer. I would always say to people, what's the difference between getting over and being over? And I asked that question 100 times. I bet you I got 100 answers.
Well, sure. Yeah. Being over is the people don't get tired of seeing you. They don't know what you're going to do. You know, you got to work hard to get over, and you have to do. You mentioned Johnny Valentine, who was an absolute master, a master.
God, yeah.
See, and like you just said, he would take an arm. Well, his psychology was he was schooling the people that were watching as what was going on.
Yeah.
He was showing the people, you're watching a wrestler here. You're watching a wrestling match.
You're my students and I'm your professor.
Exactly. Pay attention to me, he'd say, in a way. And Greg Valentine pretty much is the guy that said, the people believed in us because we believed in what we were doing.
And that's what you have to do.
What we were doing. And so when they saw Johnny Valentine get out of that armbar or whatever and do a high spot, boy, that meant something. That was
Absolutely.
that was
well,
a
let's
pop.
Talk
that
about
was big.
that. Davey, you know, you mentioned high spots earlier in the show. Back in a time and a day when, you know, let's be honest about it, high spots back in the day was a risky thing because you had rings that were basically boxing rings.
Oh, boy.
And the ropes were not, you know, spring tight like they are now, you know?
Sure.
You got ropes now that are like, you may as well say just like, you know, springs, because that's pretty much all they are. They're spring action. And they're so tight you could do the great Rolanda walk across them.
Yep.
You know? Back in the day, you got hung up in a rope. I remember, oh my God, I remember seeing this. Don Leo Jonathan, and I know that you knew him, Davey. Don Leo Jonathan was 6'9".
Yep.
300 and probably 330, 340. Big man. I saw him get wrapped up in a rope between the second and third rope and hung there by his neck. Now, you know he was okay, but still, the visual of a 6'9" guy hanging by his neck from the second and third rope, draped on the outside of the ring, was a sight to behold. And
you're not kidding.
Just, oh my God, you wanted to go help him. You know, is he okay? Oh my God, is he going to be all right? That was the psychology.
See, some guys were really skilled in certain moves. And again, you know, I'll tell you guys, I won't be insulted if you say, be quiet for a second, you're talking too much. But who else was really skilled with that was Manny Soto, Cyclone Soto. And I was working in the Bronx with him one night. We used to go to a place called the Puerto Rican Theater. And it was always a full house. It was one of Vince's spot shows during the week.
Yeah.
And I tossed Manny over the top, and he hung himself up.
Yeah.
And he was choking. You know, he was given that same visual that Don Leo was given. And Manny is in there, but in Spanish, he says, he's killing me. I went, uh-oh.
Oh, shit.
You know, because I was on the other side of the ring tightening the ropes up. So he says it, and before you know it, there were probably 10 or 15 people climbing up and getting Manny out of that problem he had. But then they figured, well, while we're here, we might as well kill Davey O'Hannon.
There you go.
Know? And when I tell you they chased me right out of the building. Right out of the building. It was, and why? Because Manny was telling them a story that was so convincing.
Yeah.
They believed in it.
Well, let me ask you a question, Davey. That's a really good question. A really good segue to ask a question, and then I'm going to let Seth follow up. Have there been buildings, Davey, that you've worked that were so hot you were afraid to go back?
Well, it was fun to go back, but you know, you always have that in your mind. You always have that in your mind. I've been cut and punched and had cigarettes put out on me, and you know, had full diapers thrown at me, and you know, it's been all kinds of stuff.
For a reason, I heard an interview recently with Michael P.S. Hayes. Michael Hayes from the Fabulous Freebirds said that he was petrified every time he had to work the Von Erichs at the Sportatorium in Dallas.
Oh yeah, that was a tough place.
Well, that was a tough place. Not only was it a tough place, but the Von Erichs were like God in Texas.
Yeah, exactly right. And before Seth gets in there, and I apologize again, there was a place in Brooklyn.
Right.
There was a place in Brooklyn in Greenpoint. St. Stanislaus was the name of it, and they had a little arena. The parish, I guess, owned the building or whatever it was, and we used to work there all the time. And I worked. I had a whole series with Kevin Sullivan when he first came in, and he was a babyface. But anyway, I worked with Kevin in St. Stanislaus one night.
Kevin was a face?
Oh yeah, that's how he got here. Sure. And
the devil was a face.
Yeah, and we had a really good hot match that wound up, I don't know, no contest, thrown out, double DQ, whatever it was, I don't know. But the next time we came back, 4 weeks later, I went up the steps and I stepped into the aisle and I took a look, and there was a guy right on the aisle that had a huge Bowie knife on his hip. And when I stepped up, he unsnapped it and took it out of the sheath, and he was holding it next to his leg. And I went, uh-oh. I stepped back to where I was safe down the steps, and I said to Arnold Skoll, and I said, Arnold, I said, listen, there's a guy right on the aisle, and as soon as I stepped up there, he focused on me. I said, he's got the biggest freaking knife you ever saw, that I ever saw anyway. I said, and I'm not going out there until you send somebody out to see what's going on. Well, sure enough, they arrested him. They took him out of there. I didn't know.
He had intended on using it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy stuff. I got, somebody got me in Colorado on my left arm with a barber's razor.
I had Larry Zbyszko here last week. He talks about being up in Albany, New York.
Yep.
And going out to the ring, coming back from the ring, and having one of the boys say to him, "Hey, do you know you're bleeding?"
Oh, yeah.
He was bleeding. He said, "No, I don't know where am I bleeding from?" He goes, "Turn around." He goes, so he looks over his shoulder, and sticking out of his ass is an army knife from a woman. A woman stabbed him in the ass with an army knife, and the handle broke off. The blade was stuck in his butt cheek.
Well, yeah. Listen, and again, I apologize, Seth. I came home after working someplace one night. We had first gotten married. We had an apartment, and I didn't want to wake my wife up and go in the bedroom, turn a light on. So in the hallway, I turned a light on, took my stuff off, threw my tights and everything over by the laundry. And as I walked by the bed, she had woken up, and she said, "Wait a minute, what happened to your hip?" I said, "Oh, what's that?" So I had 3 stitches on my right hip. I said, a lady stuck a nail file in the side of my leg as I walked back to the dressing room. She popped it in. Yeah, and I'm kind of like fussy about being clean, and I'm thinking to myself, oh crap, this lady just cleaned her toenails and then she stuck it in my leg. What the hell, But I had to get 3 stitches on the side of my thigh, up high near my hip. Brother. She popped that baby right in there. And why? Because as far as we were concerned, our psychology was to tell these people such a vivid story that they either loved you or hated you.
Exactly. And that's what you wanted them to do.
Oh, yeah. Mission accomplished.
Oh, yeah. You want them to hate you. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah.
Well, that's I loved being a heel. When I was working in wrestling, I was a manager. I was a heel manager. And if we're talking starting riots, now we're talking my language, because I used to love getting under the skin of the audience and interacting with them. And then if they went too far, I never was stabbed, luckily, but I wasn't opposed to fighting. Of course, the boxing was in me back then, you know, bare knuckle boxing and all that stuff. So I wasn't opposed to like getting into it. And in the time that I was doing it, you still could without getting sued immediately, you know, where today it's like you can't do it at all. But I have to tell a story. My best friend, she always shows this picture when people say, hey, what's your friend Seth like? And she brought a friend of hers, this very conservative young woman, intellectual artist, to one of my wrestling matches way back when. And she'd never been to one before and everything. And she took a picture of her friend whose mouth open, screaming at the top of her lungs, holding a tall boy of Pabst Blue Ribbon up in the air, and just a snarled, angry face, you know, look on her face. And my friend tells people, this is what my friend Seth does. This is what he does to people. So he's the nicest guy in the world, but that's what he does. And so I was going to go back to wrestling at one point, and I sat down with the booker, and he said, this was maybe only 3-4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And he said, you know, okay, a couple of rules. You can't swear, which I said, well, shit. And then he said, you can't start a riot. You can't incite people to throw things at you. You can't interact directly with the audience or an audience member. And I said, well, that's my whole routine. How am I supposed to get them to react? How am I supposed to be a real villain here? Yeah. You know, and not. So I said, you know, I don't know. I can't get in there and just read a script. It just wasn't in me to do that, you know. So it's that is in our blood, and it should be in our blood as professional wrestlers, whether you're a face or a heel, to want to garner that real response.
Well, that you know, Seth, you brought up a question right in your dissertation there. Here's a question for you, Mr. Hannon, dear friend of mine. Can you teach someone? Can that art, can that skill be taught? Or is it truly you're born with it? Is it inside you?
Well, you know, you have to cultivate your character, you know, whoever you want it to be. I found it easier to be a heel. Because I could smirk. I could just say, shut up, you know, or you know, however it's done. But if you're working with someone that's relatively new, or sometimes you'd be working with a baby face that is eager to show some of his stuff, well, what you have to teach them, and we used to do it right in the ring while the match is going on. Yeah. They have to know that the selling part is huge. It's huge. Because if you don't sell enough, then the people don't buy into your pain. They don't buy into that problem you have. So a heel who pretty much runs the match, has to every once in a while say, not yet. You know who was one of the best baby faces ever was Joe Scarpa. Chief Strongbow.
Oh, Chief J. Strongbow, sure.
If you put, and there's a guy you didn't have to say anything to, because he was such a fantastic professional.
Oh my God!
That he knew, you know, he knew what to do. So if I was working with the Indian, you know, my philosophy, the part of the psychology was to be a heel, to be a successful heel. You gotta be three things. You have to be vicious. You have to be sneaky, and you have to be a coward.
Absolutely right.
So at the right moment.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Shit. Absolutely.
Yeah. So if I was working with the.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Good.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, can we talk about the Chief for a minute?
Talk about anything you want.
Talk about the Chief. Yeah, I want to talk about the Chief for a minute. Because Chief was all those things you said he was. But he was also a guy that was really divisive in the back, in the back room. You either
Well,
loved the Chief or you didn't. Like, why was he so divisive, or was he just the guy who said, "This is the way it is, and this is what you're going to do"?
Yeah, he protected our business. So if he was in a position to tell somebody what to do, he did it. Now, personally, he and I always got along really well.
Right.
Not a problem. Not a problem. I've heard other people say, I can't stand him. I hate him. He was an office guy. Well, guess what? At the end, that's what he was. He worked for the office. So we don't know what he's being told from in the office in Connecticut.
Sure.
He knows, if they say to him, okay, Chief, you got the house in Scranton tonight. Take care of it. Here's who you have. Here's what I want to happen. He would go up to you and say, okay, Davey, I need 12 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't need 11. I don't need 13. I need 12 minutes.
Yeah.
What I want you to do and get so-and-so's, get Larry Zbyszko's hand up. You got it. That's all you have to tell me.
There you go.
You don't have to tell me. I'd say, Larry, what are you going to do? I'll use the stretch. Okay. That's pretty much, unless things were really complicated, that's all we talked about. Mm-hmm. He knew I was a heel. I knew he was a baby. And we went out there, and first of all, a good heel first gets out wrestled.
Yeah.
That's what frustrates you and makes you vicious.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll try to wrestle Larry or Tony Garea or Rick Martel or whoever it might have been, and they would make me look silly wrestling.
Yeah.
So now it's time for me to say, well, screw this. Yeah, you want to make me look silly like this? Well, here, try this one on your chin. See if this makes you look silly. Boom. Then you take over, and then you whack them all around, and you're vicious. And maybe when it's time for them to make a little comeback, on your knees, cross my heart, hope to die, ask the people, boom, you got hit again. Sorry, Tony Garea, you're back down here with me, and we're doing it. But now when it's time now the people are really, really sick of me. They're really tired of this, and they want to see a major ass kicking going on.
Exactly.
And we know who the recipient of that ass kicking is going to be.
Of course.
Okay. Me. That's good.
Absolutely.
That's good. But what you had to do with some baby faces, you really had to read the crowd. You had to read the crowd, and that's why
I want to stop you right there, because reading the crowd is where I want you to go with this.
Okay.
What's it like? And you've been there, and I know you've been there because I saw the match. What's it like to have 25,000 people staring at you? You in one corner, knowing that Bruno is in the other corner.
You're saying to yourself, holy crap, it's Bruno.
I saw the match today from the Philadelphia Spectrum.
Yeah.
So now, I know you, and I knew Bruno, and I knew that, you guys were great friends, but he looked like he wanted to rip your balls off in that match.
Well, yeah, because once we got out there, it wasn't, whoever it was, whether it was Bruno or Strongbow or Johnny Rods or Pete Sanchez or Manny, didn't matter who it was. Like I told you before, we were out there to win an athletic contest.
Yeah.
So there's no fooling around going on. And if you were proficient in your craft, which eventually I think I got to be, if you were proficient in your craft, the hardest match you ever had was with somebody that didn't know what they were doing. That was terrible.
Yeah,
that was terrible. If there was, and this is not a knock. My kid told me he watched a match with a guy named Joe Mascaro and I from the Spectrum. And my son said, "Dad,
oh my God, yes, I know exactly what match you're talking about. I sure do."
See, I never saw it, but my son said, "You look like you got a little aggravated, and you look like you were laying some in there." Well, yeah, I probably, and I don't remember a lot of matches, but I do remember.
Oh, it's on YouTube, Davey. Go look at it.
Oh, is it really? Well,
yeah, it sure
I remember.
Is.
You see, a guy like me would resent somebody that came into business and didn't know what to do right away. Now, I was that kind of guy.
It looked like you were potatoing the guy pretty good.
Yeah, I was.
It looked like you were, lobbing some real potatoes at him.
Well, I was.
And it showed. Trust me.
Well, you know why? Because he was exposing us. If he could have been an amateur and wrestled me there, okay, the people might not have liked it as much, but at least he would have been looking like a wrestler. This guy had a really great body on him.
Let's take that scenario, and then conversely, who's working? You're working with a guy. Who's a night off for you?
Oh, Strongbow was. Johnny Rods was. Pete Sanchez, Manny Soto. Here, how about this one? Ray Stevens. I got to work twice with Ray Stevens. Oh my God.
Wow, Ray the Crippler, sure.
I got a real lesson in psychology from Dory Funk Jr. When I was working in Texas. Dory Funk Jr. Now, as far as I was concerned, I was just Davey. So I said, we called him Dunk. I said, Dunk, whatever you want. He said, okay, kid, we'll do it. Dory Funk Jr. took a headlock on me. Mm-hmm. A headlock, all right, for 45 minutes.
I believe it.
We did everything off that headlock, but it was right back to the headlock. Yeah. When it was time to go home, and, throughout the match, I did my stuff, my punch, kick, whatever I did, wrestle, sure. Boom, he'd be back in that headlock. When it was time to finish up, these people were going nuts. A guy like him was so easy. The hard guys to work with were people that just didn't know what they were doing. That made, because they exposed us, they exposed us. And they made you feel stupid out there. And if you were serious about the business, then you didn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
You didn't want that to happen. If somebody threw a punch or a kick at me, now it was always a newer guy or a guy that wasn't broken in at that point, and that punch or kick missed. I've seen people react to it. I didn't react to it. You missed the punch. Shame on you. I just punched you back.
Exactly.
And Bruno said to me once, Davey, he said, if you're in a fight and you're going to throw a punch at somebody, do you pick up one of your legs and stomp? Well, I didn't do that. I used to set my feet and I would punch. I didn't stomp the mat.
Yeah.
So I said, no, Bruno, I don't do that. He said, no. He says, I just watched a guy that every time he threw a punch, he stomped. No, that gives us a bad name. That's a bad optic, man. That's all part of the psychology. Because like you said, the psychology is to convince the people that they're watching a contest.
Sure.
And convince them that you're the bad guy and the other guy's the good guy. And that's what you wanted to convey.
That makes me think of it. We kind of talked about this a few days ago, Angela, I think, is that I was saying that in this modern era, not just of wrestling, but just in our culture, the era of the harmless bar fight, not that they were ever fully harmless, but going out, having a few beers, getting in a bar brawl, or even just with your friends, even brawling around or whatever,
Yeah, Hannon knows all about that.
Going and doing that is kind of gone from a lot of the culture. So the psychology, even of a shoot, is gone because people don't know. People haven't been in a shoot, let alone a work. Yeah. And if you're doing a work that's going to work, it has to look like a shoot. But that culture is shifted. And so, how do you were asking earlier? Can it be taught, or is it something that's just in you, or not in you? I don't know if it's not in you that it can be taught cold, but I think if it's in you but not out there, it can be nurtured. Does that make sense?
Of course. And you know what? The best way to learn it is to watch people that are so good at it. Go watch a Dory or watch Bruno or Scarpa or somebody, and just watch what they're doing.
Yeah,
You know, it's just
watch what they're
say
doing.
that. One of the guys that was famous for doing that might surprise you. 7-time world champion Lou Thez used to watch other guys. And
that doesn't surprise me at all. That doesn't surprise me at all.
When Scott Casey asked him one time, Lou, you're a 7-time world champion. What are you watching these guys for? And he looked at him and said, Scott, you can always learn and you can always take a move and make it your own.
Oh yeah.
And he's absolutely right.
Even in boxing, we say, you don't win or lose, you win or learn. You take any loss as a learning moment.
That's an interesting way to look at it, Davey.
Yeah, exactly.
To win or learn.
That's exactly right. Listen, like I said, I was never broken into business. If you watch professional wrestling at some point, you'll see that everybody works on the left side of the body.
Absolutely.
Everything is on the left side. I didn't know that. I had no idea. And I used to get back in the dressing room as quick as I could, and then I'd go find a seat someplace where I could watch the card. And I sat down one night in the old Philadelphia arena, and I sat in front of Don Jardine, who was a master, the spoiler.
Sure.
And he says to me, "Hey kid," I said, "Oh, hi, Mr. Jardine." He said, "Don't give me that Mr. Jardine shit." He said, "You're one of the boys." I said, he said, "Listen," he said, "I see you work European style sometimes." Now I'm saying to myself, the heck is that? I don't know what that is. He said, "Yeah, I saw you grab him on the right side a couple of times." Oh, wait a minute. Here I am learning something here. Let me focus a little more. I watched the matches. I grabbed a couple of wrestling magazines. I said, "Look at this. Everything is on the left side."
Yeah.
Now,
I'll tell you, somebody, who was famous for that was the legendary Billy Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Billy was great. Watch Billy Robinson work. That man was amazing.
I worked with him.
Too. Big boy.
Yeah, I worked with Billy Robinson. I worked with him, I think, in Pueblo, Colorado, and Albuquerque, and Amarillo. I worked with him three or four times. We worked, and Billy, we were doing our thing, and I put a top wrist lock on him, and he got over to my ear, and he said, "You know what, mate?" He said, "I could break your leg tonight if I want to." No, I knew his reputation.
Yeah, sure.
I knew his reputation.
I said, he was a straight up shoot guy too.
Yeah, I said, "Well, I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could." Yeah. And then later that night, after the match, a lot of us lived at a place called the Center City Motor Inn in Amarillo. Mm-hmm. I'm in the room. I had my door open. It was a nice night. And Billy came walking by, and he's got a few beers. He says, "Hey, come on in. Shut the door so nobody sees us." So he said, we haven't really met. So we talked for a few minutes. Nice man. I got along great with him. I said, "Billy," I said, I just got to tell you something. He said, "What? What's that, mate?" I said, "You remember 2 nights ago or last night you said to me, you could break my leg anytime you wanted to?" "Oh, yeah. He kind of smiled. I said, "Well, you know what? I know that. I know that. I know you pack some shit here." I said, "But you got to understand something. You break my leg," I said, "then you can't walk down any street in the United States for the rest of your life without worrying about somebody walking up behind you and breaking a baseball bat over your head." I said, "You got to remember that might happen too." So we laughed. We finished the beer. Actually, we're laughing, and unfortunately, there was a girl walking by our room on the sidewalk, and she was rather full-figured. She was about the size of Billy and I put together. And Billy says to me, "Well, I'll bet you another 6-pack that I can suplex her." I said, "You can't suplex her." He said, "Is the bet on?" I said, "It's on." He says,
God.
He says, excuse me. She knew who the wrestlers were.
Oh, sure.
Now I'm worried about getting fired for being in front of the fans here with the guy I just worked with that night. But he brings her in the room, goes behind her. suplexes her onto my bed. The bed broke and flattened out on the floor. I wound up having to buy a bed frame from the hotel. I said to him, "You asshole! Now you can." I said, "You just broke the bed I got to sleep on for the next 3 days till I go back on the road." I said, "And you want me to buy the beer too, right?" He said, "Yep." He said, "You lost the bet." Okay, he suplexed her. Yeah, belly to back suplex, splattered my bed to the floor. It was unreal.
What other furniture did you have to reimburse the hotel for?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't sleep on it. It was broken. It was broken right down the middle in half. The box spring wood broke. The frame bent to the floor. I went to the desk. I said, "Do we have any other beds?" He said, "What's the matter with the one you have?" I said, "Well, I fell on it and it broke. You know, I didn't tell him Billy Robinson suplexed a 400-pound girl onto it."
How was the woman? What happened to her?
Oh, I don't know. I think we tossed her out and finished the beer. I think I'm not sure.
I'll tell you what. That sounds like a great ending to a night.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'll tell you what, Davey. It is always story time with Davey Hannon when he comes on there. You know, you got a 30-plus year career in professional wrestling. You don't leave without a few stories, and Davey's got a steamer trunk full of them. Brother, I'm going to let you go tonight because this is the fastest hour we've had in a long time. Can I get you back here next week, Davey?
Anytime you want.
Can we do a part 2 next week?
Yep, no problem.
Beautiful. Seth, I got you for next week?
Yeah, I think I can arrange that. That should be all right.
Cool. Excellent.
Same place, same time.
Yeah, stay with me, you guys. I want to say goodnight to everybody. Well, this is going to be part 1 of ring psychology and storytelling, and I got 2 great guys tonight. We got Mr. Fish and Chips himself, Seth Witz, and Irish Davey Hannon. He is the most Italian-Irish guy I ever met in my life, and he's my neighbor here in Atlantic City, not far away at all. So, fortunately, I am going to have to say goodnight to everybody, unfortunately, but we will be back next week. And as we continue to wrestle with the future, have a great night, everybody. Enjoy your week. Be safe, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you. Take care.